we'll kind of change gears here. We talked a lot about what goes on in Kansas here. One of the hot topics, and I don't think it's ever been addressed on this show, one of the hot topics in the news in equal and shared parenting right now is the situation that happened in Lubbock, Texas, back in November. They had a news conference. The family had a news conference yesterday in Lubbock, Texas. But Chad Reed was killed during a custody change, or what was supposed to be a custody exchange, and boyfriend stepped in and shot him dead on their front lawn. I don't want to dive too deep into Texas law. Texas guns and when you can shoot someone is different than any other state in the union. They're completely different. Every other state, you have to be in someone's house. Texas, you do not. So I don't want to dive into the criminal facts of it, but I want to talk about the custody side of things. So one of the more problematic things in whether it be domestic violence cases, or where there's accusations of domestic violence, or where parents simply do not get along. What are some tips you can give to people, or how would you attack maybe a high conflict situation when custody exchanges are needed?
So we have a lot of high conflict cases down here. My tendency is to be as specific as possible in both the temporary orders and in the final orders on exchanges, where they're at, who is allowed to be there. We do, and kind of referring back to that Texas case, in some of the cases that we have where the parents have different spouses, different relationships, we put it in the temporary order, we only allow the natural parents to be present at the exchanges. If that were put into that order down in Texas, that incident would have never occurred because stepdad or boyfriend or whoever it was would have never been there. So specific time, specific place, and parties. So if you have those three, then you can really control how that exchange is going to occur. And also after that, I always advise my clients, always check in via text message prior to the exchange. You can text the other side. I will be here at this time. I'm alone with the child. Let me know your ETA and who you're with. And if you do that, then you can really control the exchanges. Now, there are some cases that aren't very contested. You can kind of be loose with it, but I always like to have at least those three in there so that we know exactly what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and what time it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's huge advice right there. Specific time, place, and parties. That immediately takes me back to the case where I said the roles were kind of flipped from where I typically am representing men, where the dad was getting frustrated. So we had visitation, and it was supervised visitation by a third party. So in court, we couldn't specify the place, or we couldn't specify the time, we couldn't specify the place. We could specify the parties, but with no time or place, dad was getting very frustrated because mom was given 3 supervised visits a week to be supervised by a list of 3 people they'd agreed upon. Mm-hmm. Well, it's in mom's best interest to blow his phone up any and every time that those people say, hey, I can do a visit. And dad's getting frustrated, but we're like, well, it's in her best interest to blow you up. It was via talking parents, but it's in her best interest to be constantly on you about getting her visitation. And then she perceives it as, if you aren't responsive, as you acting in your selfish best interest to not get her the visitations. And so ironically enough, I'm in court tomorrow morning on that case where we're going to resolve some of those issues, but that's a big thing. Be as specific as possible.
Yeah. And we have also, in a vast majority of the cases that I have, usually the receiving parent drives to the parent letting go of the child to their residence or a mutually agreed upon place that might be halfway. So sometimes we have halfway, sometimes we have residential pickups, but in some of these highly contested cases, we have to set the place as a law enforcement agency. We have several that have to come up here to the Iowa Police Department or the Allen County Sheriff's Office or whichever law enforcement in whichever county we're working in. That's where the exchange occurs. So, and also, I guess going back to, after we file the petition in for the temporary orders, So when the other side gets served with those temporary orders, they're not happy. So in those temporary orders, we put that law enforcement is ordered to assist in the initial exchange of the child. That way, that situation that happened down in Texas does not occur, or if it does occur, law enforcement's there. So when we file and get the temporary order, we call law enforcement and say, our client's on the way to this residence to get this child, and you're ordered to go help, and we'll fax you the order just so you have backup.
Yeah. That's one of the, I guess that goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier about the sometimes you can't prevent it being a turning into, I guess, a proverbial boxing match between the two parents if the communication is not there. But I think that if you're able to put specific time, specific place, if you're able to limit the number of people that can be present there, that you can create more certainty around the situation. I think you made another really good point too. Is I always like to have it where receiving parent does the pickup at the residence.
Yes,
So then there's no argument about, oh, I'm losing parenting time, this and that. Well, when it was supposed to be your time, you're supposed to be at their curb, and the kids are going to run out and get in your car.
absolutely.